It all began on a cold Monday morning when I received a letter that would change everything I thought I owned, everything I believed was safe, and every single piece of land my family had worked for generations to protect. The envelope looked ordinary, a simple cream paper with the HOA's emblem stamped in blue ink, but the words inside were enough to burn a hole through my chest. Notice of sale. The property formerly registered under your family trust, totaling 3,000 acres, has been transferred. At first I thought it was some kind of mistake, maybe a clerical error. How could the homeowners association possibly sell my land? Land that had been in my family for more than a century. Land where I had grown up learning to ride horses, plant corn, and fix broken fences with my father. The letter didn't just sting, it mocked me. The bold words seemed to scream that I was powerless. For days, I couldn't eat properly. My neighbors had started whispering, some even congratulating a new so-called buyer, who they said had gotten the deal of a lifetime. 3,000 acres, worth well over $12 million, gone, with nothing more than a forged signature and a council of smug HOA board members who thought they were untouchable. I remember walking down the gravel road toward the main gate of my ranch, the air crisp with winter frost, and seeing a bright red "Sold" sign hammered into the ground like a final insult. That sign stood there as if it owned me, taunting every memory tied to the soil beneath it. And when I saw one of the HOA board members standing there in her bright pink suit, smiling with that arrogant smirk, something inside me snapped. I had tried to reason with them before. I had sat in their long, drawn-out meetings where they waved rules in my face like weapons. But this was no longer about rules. This was theft. I took the letter, the deed records, everything I had, and stormed into the county courthouse. My boots echoed in the marble halls as I carried generations of my family's legacy in a folder tucked under my arm. The clerk, a middle-aged man with glasses slipping down his nose, looked at me with pity as he confirmed what I feared most. Yes, the land had been transferred. Legally. At least, that's what the papers showed. A sale authorized not by me, but by signatures and stamps that looked official enough to pass. I wanted to scream, but instead, I clenched my fists and walked out, the sound of my spurs biting the floor reminding me of the fight ahead. Outside, the town square buzzed with people going about their lives, while my world had been stolen right from under me. I swore then and there, staring at the courthouse steps, that I wouldn't let them get away with this. They thought they were clever, hiding behind laws and fine print, but I knew something they didn't. Revenge could be legal too. The following weeks became a blur of meetings with lawyers, late night digging through archives, and phone calls with old friends who still owed me favors. I found out the HOA wasn't just greedy, they were drowning in debt. Years of mismanagement had left them scrambling for money, and they had seen my land as their golden ticket. They thought if they sold it quickly, no one would question them until it was too late. What they didn't realize was that desperation makes people sloppy. In one of the files I dug up, hidden behind pages of routine expenses, I found something. The HOA's crown jewel, a private lake system spanning hundreds of acres, complete with dams, irrigation rights, and fishing permits. It wasn't just a lake. It was the beating heart of the entire neighborhood, worth more than $12 million. Without it, the HOA would collapse, homeowners would lose their water source, property values would sink, and the board's power would dissolve overnight. My heart pounded as I stared at the papers. If they could take what was mine, then I would take what they couldn't live without, but I would do it by the book. I remember driving out to the lake one evening, parking my truck by the wooden dock where children once ran barefoot in the summer. The water shimmered under the setting sun, reflecting streaks of gold and crimson. I stood there silently, imagining the panic in their faces when they realized this lake was no longer theirs. That night, as I leaned on the railing, a plan began to take shape. I wouldn't fight them with fists or shouts. I would fight them with signatures, just like they had fought me. The first step was patience. I had to move carefully. One wrong slip and they'd bury me under lawsuits and counterclaims. I started with small visits to the county records office, asking casual questions, pulling old files, pretending to be curious about water rights in general. I learned the history of the lake, how it was once part of a larger estate, then subdivided and handed over to the HOA under strict conditions. Conditions they had quietly violated. My hands shook as I flipped through those old yellowed pages. Violations meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant opportunity. During those long nights, I thought about my father, how he always said land wasn't just dirt and grass, it was blood. Our ancestors had worked every inch of it, fought for it, and passed it down. To lose it so easily, to a group of power-hungry board members in suits, was a betrayal of everything they stood for. I whispered a promise to him, standing in my kitchen under the dim glow of a single light bulb. I'll get it back. One way or another. But the fight was heavier than I imagined. They sent letters mocking me, claiming I had no standing, that I should move on with my life. One of them even laughed at me in public, saying I should be grateful they let me keep my small house at the edge of the property. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would crack, but I didn't respond. Instead, I watched, waited, and built my case. One evening, while going through yet another stack of dusty files in the county's back office, I discovered the final piece of the puzzle, the original transfer agreement of the lake. Hidden in the fine print was a clause: if the HOA violated any terms of maintenance, environmental care, or failed to pay state taxes on water usage, ownership could legally revert to the first eligible claimant. My pulse raced as I read it again and again. They had violated every single one. Trash in the water, unapproved construction, late tax filings, it was all there, documented and undeniable. I walked out of that office into the cool night air with a smile for the first time in weeks. The board thought they had buried me, but in their arrogance, they had left the back door wide open. I knew now exactly what I had to do. I spent the next month building my claim, filing paperwork, gathering photographs, and consulting with a lawyer who had once been burned by the HOA himself. Every step felt like laying bricks in a wall they would soon crash into. When the day of the hearing arrived, I walked into that courthouse not as a victim but as a hunter. The board members sat across from me, smirking as always, dressed in their polished suits and fake confidence. But their smiles faded when my lawyer pulled out the stack of violations, each page a nail in their coffin. The room grew tense. Papers shuffled, voices raised, but the law was clear. For every sneer they had thrown at me, I now had a document that crushed it. And when the judge finally leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and declared that I had legal grounds to claim ownership of the lake system, the silence in the room was sweeter than any victory I'd ever known. The HOA had stolen my land, but now, their $12 million empire was slipping through their fingers into mine. And that was just the beginning. When I walked out of that courthouse, the cold air bit my face, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't sting. I felt alive. I clutched the papers to my chest, each page confirming the victory I had carved out of the ashes of betrayal. The lake was mine, not stolen, not forged, but won through their own negligence, their own arrogance. I didn't cheat them. I beat them at the very game they had used to cheat me. Word spread quickly. By the time I reached the diner at the edge of town, whispers were already buzzing from booth to booth. Old men with coffee cups paused mid-sip to look at me, women behind the counter raised eyebrows, and even the sheriff gave me a nod of respect. Everyone knew what had happened. The HOA, once feared, once untouchable, had just lost their crown jewel, and they had lost it to the man they thought they had destroyed. But this was only the beginning. Ownership on paper was one thing, making them feel the weight of it was another. That evening, I drove down to the lake. The water stretched out calm and endless under the moonlight. I stood on the dock, my boots creaking against the wood, and I realized that this place was now legally mine. The irony nearly made me laugh. They had taken my family's land, 3,000 acres of history, and in return, I had taken the heart that kept their entire community alive. Without this lake, they were nothing. The next day, I filed notices. Legally, every homeowner who relied on that water was now required to negotiate with me. Irrigation rights, fishing permits, recreational access, all of it flowed through my name now. And just as they had once waved rules in my face, I now returned the favor, only this time it was justified. I didn't charge outrageous amounts, not yet. No, I let them stew in fear first, realizing their survival depended on the man they had mocked, ridiculed, and robbed. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard the shouting carried through the thin walls of their office. Neighbors told me the pink-suited woman, the same one who had laughed when I lost everything, nearly broke into tears as the reality set in. The HOA was bankrupt without the lake, and homeowners were furious. For once, their power meant nothing. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. They sent me letters begging for a compromise, offering me a settlement far below the lake's worth. I ignored them. Then came threats, lawsuits, claims that I had misrepresented myself, even rumors they tried to spread that I was a fraud. But every threat they sent, I countered with the same weapon they had once used against me: cold, hard paperwork. My lawyer filed response after response, shutting them down at every corner. I'll never forget the day I walked into a community meeting unannounced. The room was packed, homeowners sitting in folding chairs, shouting, pointing fingers at the board. When I stepped inside, the noise died down to a hush. All eyes turned to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply held up the official deed to the lake and let the silence do the talking. Then I said, slow and steady, "You took my land. You thought you broke me. But you forgot one thing: I play by the rules better than you ever could. This lake is mine now. And I don't owe you anything." The board members' faces turned pale. The pink-suited woman clenched her jaw, her arrogance melting into desperation. A man in a gray suit tried to argue, but the homeowners shouted him down. They weren't angry at me. They were angry at them. The people who had sworn to protect their interests had gambled everything and lost. And now they had to face the consequences. But I wasn't cruel. My family had taught me better than that. I didn't want to see children without water to swim in or farmers without fields to irrigate. I wanted justice, not destruction. So I made them a deal, one written on my terms, not theirs. Every homeowner could keep access to the lake, but only after dissolving the HOA entirely. No more board, no more abuse of power, no more games. They had to sign away their authority and accept that their empire was gone. The vote was unanimous. The HOA crumbled that very night, their papers shredded, their titles meaningless. What had once been a group of arrogant tyrants was reduced to nothing more than a bitter memory. And as they walked out of that room, shoulders slumped, faces down, I knew I had won more than just land or water. I had won back my dignity. In the months that followed, I restored the lake. Clean-up crews hauled away trash, fences were repaired, and I opened parts of it to the public for free. Children laughed on the docks again, fishermen cast their lines at sunrise, and for the first time in years, the community felt whole. People stopped seeing me as the man who lost everything. Instead, they saw me as the man who stood up, fought back, and won. But for the board members, life was never the same. The pink-suited woman sold her house and moved away quietly. The man in the gray suit filed for bankruptcy. One by one, the empire they had built on lies collapsed. And while I never celebrated their ruin, I also never pitied them. They had chosen greed over decency, and they had paid the price. Sometimes, late at night, I walk along the shore of the lake, the moon casting silver ripples across the water. I think of my father, of the land that was taken, of the battles fought not with fists but with patience and resolve. I think about how close I came to losing everything forever, and how, in the end, I reclaimed more than I had imagined. The HOA thought they had written the final chapter of my story when they hammered that sold sign into the ground. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't finished. I took their pen, their ink, their laws, and I rewrote the ending myself. And so, while my 3,000 acres may be gone, they are not forgotten. They live in every sunrise over the lake, in every child's laughter that echoes across the water, and in every farmer's harvest nourished by the streams I now protect. The land they stole from me gave me the fire to take back something far greater. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with fists or fire. Sometimes, justice comes with a quiet signature, a steady hand, and the will to fight until the very end. And in my case, justice came in the form of 12 million gallons of water, and every drop of it is mine.